Everybody is doing well. I know a lot of us throughout the country and throughout the world actually are trying to deal with this heat because it is definitely hot. It's even hot here in Durham, North Carolina. I think today we were up to a temperature of high 90s and probably felt like 100 because it is definitely some warm weather out there, and folks are definitely dealing with that, trying to stay cool, trying to stay in the air conditioning as much as possible, and all along those lines. When I bring in my guest, we're going to find out how the weather is treating her where she is and all in that kind of space. But definitely looking forward to a great kind of conversation. I've been called many things, but I think that was the first guest that in a pre-interview had told me that they found the interviews in the past to be dynamic and interesting, and that is what I strive for, and all along those lines. So that was definitely a compliment that I do not take lightly or anything in that space. So always good to find amazing people that are doing amazing things and that are not letting the constraints of time or the constraints of a number of other things stop them from being the successes that they should be, and all in that kind of way. So definitely looking forward to the conversation with Miss Healy and seeing what she's got going on in that space, and definitely sharing some of the wisdom that she has garnered from a world of travel as well as just a rich life and all in that kind of space. We're going to bring Kathy in and she can share some of what she has been doing and all in that kind of space. As I was telling her, I find some amazing guests through RTIR, which is a podcasting referral source for guests and all in that kind of way. And another amazing one that I actually think a friend of mine knows the owner of, which is Podcast Guests. They oftentimes will find you some amazing folks that are doing great work, including traveling the world and definitely even deciding to work much later in life than some people expect. Because you got some folks that think that you need to retire at 60 or 65, and I even know some young folks that are hoping to retire at the age of 30 or 35. I know from the experiences of my dad, who is still working to some degree in his art field. He is definitely very active in his art in the early years of 83 and all in that space. And even though mom is a retired, she is still active as well. Maybe not as much on the workforce, but still very active. And I know that one of the jobs that I've had in the past has been working with a testing company called Measurement Incorporated that is based here in Durham, North Carolina. And we have some employees that are in their 70s, in their 80s, and I think there might even be one or two that are in their 90s, and they are still continuing to grade those folks, as that is a standardized testing company that grades a lot of the end of the year tests for a lot of folks, whether that is Common Core or whether that is individual states, such as in the past, I know we've done Texas and we've done Tennessee and a number of other states in that kind of way. So it is always good having amazing folks that are doing great things in that kind of lane. And I've got a dear friend of mine that has done a lot of traveling, and I'm gonna bring in Kathy and see if she's done as much. But a dear friend of mine has probably traveled to roughly 70 or 80, maybe even more countries and all along those lines. So she is oftentimes talking about where she's going. And I think she's been to Transylvania and been to some of the other European places, definitely traveled around Africa, definitely traveled around a number of other places, and is one of my fellow Marquette alumni. So Janine Klein has definitely done quite a bit of traveling, and definitely, as we even went on a trip together once, and that was actually on a cruise trip, and that was going down by Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, the Grand Turks, and there might have been one or two other steps. And I've always said that I need to do more world travel because that cruise was probably the first world travel that I had done, and that was roughly 5 years ago. And I had not done any other world travel except for when I was born. My dad was stationed in the Air Force, so at a roughly 3 or 4 months, they whisked me off to Turkey because that's where Dad was stationed at. I believe it was Ankara, and I was there until about the age of 3. So had they world travel for a hot minute, but not nearly enough of the world travel as I would like. So I'm going to bring in Miss Healy and learn more about this lovely world traveling that she's been doing and all in that kind of space. So when did you first decide that you was going to be a world traveler? Like I said, I got the bug when I was young, but I didn't keep the bug, meaning the travel bug. And then that friend got me to go on that one cruise, and I've always said I need to do some more cruises, and I definitely need to see more of this great world of ours because I haven't seen nearly enough of it. I've seen quite a bit of the United States, but there are even parts of the United States that I haven't covered either. So I definitely need to do some more traveling. So when did you decide to catch this travel bug?
Actually, I didn't decide. I'm one of 13 children. And when I was 18, I graduated from high school, and my mother said to me, your Aunt Helen in Florida is sick. I need to send you there and help her in Florida. I was living in Pennsylvania.
Well,
My mother put me on a train, a 3-day train. This is in 1964.
mhm,
She put me on a train all by myself, packed my lunch. I didn't know there was a food car. I just sat in my seat, used the bathroom, and went back to my seat for 3 days. So I
well,
spent the summer helping my Aunt Helen in Florida, came home, and before I came home, I said, "Where's my return ticket?" to my mother. And she said, "Find your own way home."
well,
And I was still 18, and I said, okay. I found a job cleaning a dental office and made some money, found my way back to Pennsylvania. And I said, okay, I'm not staying here. And I got a job in a steel company in Pennsylvania, sat next to a woman who was from Cuba, and she had immigrated with her brother, but her family lived in New Orleans. So she said to me, "You want to go meet my brother?" So within 6 weeks of coming back from Florida, I went to New Orleans with the girl sitting next to me at work. And we
well,
traveled to New Orleans, and we traveled, here and there on trains. Back in the 60s, you had trains or buses. Flying was pretty much out of it unless you had a lot of money. And I was young and single. And so I started traveling with girlfriends and doing things like that. And I just got the bug. I would go home from time to time. And when you're the oldest of 13 kids, you have to work. You're
mhm,
working in the house, you're changing diapers, you're mopping floors, you're going to the grocery, you're doing everything your mother can't do because she's attending to the other children. So I got tired of doing that. And so I started traveling.
yeah.
So that's the beginning of how I started.
It sounds like it. Sounds like some great travel experiences, even though that first travel was to take care of somebody that is elderly. And I've definitely seen some folks, even today, that have gone and moved because they have had to take care of somebody that was sick. As a matter of fact, one of my good friends who is in the social media lane is recently moved from California, where they were a counselor, to Florida because they had recently moved to take care of their mom and I think their father as well, and realized that they were not as didn't have the kind of care that they would like and weren't able to get around in the kind of way that they would like them to. So they were going to have to make that cross country move in order to help with the care. And I have another friend that did something similar, but moved from North Carolina to Florida to take care of his sister, who was definitely going through some care issues as well. So uh, did you have what were some of your early experiences, even in the '60s, going through that? And are you thinking that more and more of us are doing that, where we are having to take care of our family members, whether they be old or young? Because I do know that there are even some young people during the pandemic that went through stuff, and sometimes you might have to make moves for them as well.
Well, to answer your question, I started traveling. Almost all my family lived in the Philadelphia area. I had family in Texas, family in Florida, mostly military people that were sent there. And so sometimes, but as the oldest of 13, it was time for me to get out of the house and let my younger sisters kind of take over. And so I went to Texas to help an elderly aunt. And then that was 1965. So my sister, she, um, she was dating a guy in the Air Force. And so he was stationed in Texas. So she went with me. Um, and so we started traveling to Texas, but we took buses
Mhm.
and trains. And to take a bus ride from Philadelphia to Texas is no treat. It's not fun. And but with my sister along, we just had fun and we played cards and stuff like that. So to answer your question, helping family first is how I was brought up. You go and help someone that needs somebody who just gave birth to twins,
Mhm.
or an elderly aunt whose husband just died, things like that. You're going to be sent here and there. As my mother was one of six, her sisters all had eight, nine, seven children. So with our 13 and all these other cousins, we all lived in the same town. We lived in the town of Tommy Lasorda. Do you know who
Oh,
Tommy Lasorda is?
the LA Dodger.
Yeah, the LA Dodgers pitcher, general manager,
Right.
and Mike Piazza. They lived in our town. It's called Norristown, Pennsylvania, but that's where Tommy was from. And so, he would invite different local people not to come see the Dodgers, but to come see his nephew play in the local Pop Warner uh, and the local baseball team. So that's where Mike Piazza grew up and Tommy Lasorda grew up. So it's kind of that's what we're noted for. So I would go here and there, but when I first married, my husband was a camper. So we
Mm.
started camping in Montana, Yellowstone, all through North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, and just moving around. So I've been to all 50 states.
Oh, wow. Now, have you done a lot of travel outside of the country? Because you mentioned that your husband was in the military, and I'm imagining that as a military wife, you might have traveled with him. I mentioned that as a child, I was over there in Ankara, Turkey. I believe that's where it was. It might have been Istanbul, but I'm thinking it was Ankara and all in that way. But that was from like the months of 3 months to roughly 3 years old and all in that kind of way. So I do know that sometimes the military folks travel with their spouses. So how much of the world traveling have you done?
Well, I don't know whether you can see this or not. This says 134. I have been to 134 countries outside the United States.
Wow.
So some most of it was not with my husband. Before I had children, we lived in Hawaii. And he was in Vietnam, and he would come back to Hawaii because I was a military wife. But I didn't go to Vietnam or Cambodia or Laos. But while I was in Hawaii, I got to see Guam. I got to see the Philippines. I did travel because he was gone 45 to 80 days at a time, and I was alone, and I would just start traveling in that part of the world. And we moved back to the States in 1971. And so we started with a family and stuff like that. And it we traveled, but when he traveled, he didn't take me. I kept the children in the United States. He was in different countries: Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, uh, Brazil, Israel, things like that. He was an Air Force pilot.
Gotcha. What are some of the most interesting things that you have learned from all your travel, whether it is in the United States or whether it is around the world? I sometimes feel that we spend too much time over the differences than the things that are in common. And I think that there is a lot of commonality throughout humanity and all in that kind of way. But I just wondering what are some of the things that you observed? And do you think that I'm right that we spend too much time on the dividing factors?
The one thing I learned is it's always good to get home.
Mhm.
Uh, I travel to learn culture. I learn people. I don't ever rent a car when I travel. I take buses, trains, and public transportation. That's how you meet local people. And
Mhm.
you learn the culture. You get invited maybe to their house for lunch, or you get invited to a party, that somebody's birthday party or something like that. Uh, but what I learned was it's important as Americans to learn that everything is not in our country. Every other country, whether it be Spain, France, Israel. Um, 3 weeks ago, I was in Malak. I'm sorry. Uh, I was in South Africa. I
Mhm.
was in Zimbabwe. Zambia, Botswana, and Namibia in the month of April of this year. By going to those countries and seeing Victoria Falls, seeing the countries and seeing the exchange rate of the dollar, which is strong now, people live on $200 a month.
Right.
Sometimes they live on $200 a year. And we are so fortunate that then when we open our mouths and they know we're Americans, they automatically know we have money.
Mm.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be there. I believe it's important for us as Americans to learn culture, to
Mhm.
learn about the ethnicity of the culture. Now, there's 52 countries in Africa, and I've been there 9 times.
Mm.
But I've also been to every country in South America, but I don't speak Spanish. And I've been to many countries in the world, and I've been to Japan, and I don't speak Japanese, and
Mm.
I've been to Antarctica, and they speak English. Many, many countries in the world all speak English because they have to. If they want to do business with us in America, they have to speak English. But they want to know, I want to know about their culture,
Mhm.
how they raise their children, how they get to school, how they learn. What do they think of America? And most of the time, they want to talk about our government. And I refuse to do that. I want to talk about them.
Right.
They find our government is tries to control, and that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about who they are, how they're raised, what they eat, what they wear, how they find food.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. You want to get to know them on that personal level and all in that kind of way. Now, you are also in your 70s, and there are folks that are thinking that that's the age that you're supposed to sit back and be in the rocking chair and all along those lines. And I have never been one to believe that kind of philosophy. Like I said earlier, my dad is 83 and still quite active, and I've definitely had a number of other relatives that some that have passed on that made it into their 80s and 90s and even hundreds and stayed quite active. And I know of some dance groups, like there's the Dancing Divas and a Dude. I think that's their title, but it is basically an African American cheerleading group. And I want to say all the people are 50 plus. There might be some that are 60s and 70s and even 80s. And there is a drill team as well that I think they wear all their numbers as their age. So like if they're 50, the number might be 50. If they're 53, the number would be 53. So their jersey number is actually their age. And I saw them at a recent parade, and I know that my dad's significant other just recently did some dance performances that was a multi-age dance performance, but she was definitely, we'll say that Lisa's in her late 70s or something in that space. But how important do you think it is for folks that are, no matter what their lifestyle is or no matter what their age is, to stay active and even stay active in the travel lane as well as staying active um, physically as well?
Well, I will in 60 days. I'll be 77, and I have 9 jobs.
Wow.
Okay. Now, my jobs are significant because I am a sommelier,
Hmm.
and some people know what that is. It's a person who's a wine steward, and I pour wine for people like Drake, uh, Celine Dion,
Hmm.
people like Adele, people like Chicago, the band. And
Hmm.
so I do events and things like that. So I'm a banquet server. And so I can do breakfast at Caesars, lunch at Bellagio, dinner at Mandalay Bay. And then I can do events and be a bartender for the Aces games, which is our WNBA team, our female uh, NBA team. I'm a bartender for that for those events. So I I don't work 7 days a week. I sometimes work 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 2 days a week. A lot of my shifts are 4 hours.
Right.
So I'll go in, do a shift, come home, and so my day is what I want to make it. I get up and I exercise, maybe in a pool for 30, 35 minutes. I'll walk. Uh, it is 116 here,
Right.
and at the temperature. And so I don't walk outside. In the winter, I do. But in the last 10 days, every day has been over 110.
Well,
So by 10 o'clock in the morning, you're going to be inside at work, at the grocery store, at the mall, doing things around the house, doing errands, helping a friend. We have a lot of hotels here that have tea, like
mhm.
a afternoon tea, and you can do things like that. But we have many events here in Las Vegas that don't cost any money. I know most people don't believe that, but we have a lot of events. The hotels will teach you how to play poker for
Oh, well.
free. Okay. And so you can go to things like that, and you don't have to play cards or anything. And a lot of the afternoon shows are free. Now, they don't include children, uh, because they're adult shows.
Right.
uh, I'm not saying nude, but they're adult. And so but we do have, there's a book out, 101 Things to Do for Children in Las Vegas.
Oh, well.
Now, some of them cost money, but usually they're under $10. We have a lot of roller coasters here,
Mhm.
and a lot of bungee jumps and zip lines and things like that. And a lot of people don't get to see that because they're at the hotel gambling.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things to do. There's hiking and walking at 4 in the morning or 8 in the morning. You can't really hike after 10. It's too hot.
Yeah. Okay.
Or you can hike at 7 at night, and then it's
Right.
too dark.
Right.
So I do have 9 jobs. Uh, I have a husband, and he does motorcycle things and stuff, and he is active doing other things. But I keep busy with girlfriends. I keep busy with neighbors. I keep busy. I am a casa. I take care of children in foster care through the foster care. So they don't live with me. I
Right.
take care. They're in their home, so I do volunteer work with casa. I do volunteer work with food for the Salvation Army. I do volunteer work for unwed mothers, volunteer work for other children's organizations, and I volunteer in the schools.
Yeah, it sounds like you're keeping very busy with all of those multitude of jobs. And like I said, I did visit Vegas one time, and I was to visit the friend that was out there, but definitely am due for another visit, actually way overdue, and all in that kind of space. But you're right, there's a lot of hidden treasures. I think they were on the board of the theater, so I got to see a drumline performance when I visited out there because it was at the theater that's off of the beaten track, but it is still a popular theater, but it's not part of the strip. And I also know, even though I didn't get the chance to see them, that there's a lot of neon lights that can be very artistically seen out there as well. And I've heard amazing things about them, even though I have not had a chance to go to them. And I know there was a historical African American hotel that I think has been demolished or is no longer around, but there
Yeah,
might be.
that was the Moulin Rouge.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's gone. A lot of things are gone, but we do have a performing arts center here. It's called the Smith Center. We have a ballet group here. We have a many other performances by musical organizations. Um, so our ballet is renowned around the world. The different performances. We have Gladys Knight coming here. We have single nights. We have all the Broadway shows are coming here. So I happen to volunteer at some of those organizations. But there's many things other than just what you consider Las Vegas. Las Vegas isn't about gambling. It's about coming and great food. We have Gordon Ramsay, Bradley Ogden. We have all the famous chefs of the world. They're all coming here because everybody wants to be seen. Bobby Flay is here, and
Mm,
Wolfgang Puck, and
yeah.
everybody's here.
And there's some amazing history there as well, not just the Moulin Rouge, but just some of the history of the creation of Las Vegas. I know that when I came there, the gentleman that was, I think he was an Uber driver, I don't think he was Lyft, but he was definitely given some lessons of things that he had learned, and he was relatively young, but he had already gotten indoctrinated into the history of Vegas, and there was definitely some rich history, everything from some of the gang involvement to a number of other things as well. So it's definitely something that is known and all in that kind of space and everything. So that's always fascinating, also.
Yeah, when you talk about the Moulin Rouge, even Sammy Davis Jr., who was part of the Rat Pack, he had to come in the back door.
Right.
And he wasn't allowed to eat in different restaurants. He wasn't allowed to stay in certain hotels. Everybody was, separate back then. And little by little, you know what? If you have money, you can come here.
Hmm.
That's the way it is now. It's not about money; it's about entertainment.
Yeah.
So we have Formula One coming in November. We have the Super Bowl coming in February. We have Matt. You know what Madison Square Garden is?
Hmm.
Well,
The
Madison Square Garden is in New York, but we in Las Vegas have a Madison Square Garden now.
Oh wow.
It hasn't opened yet, and U2 is going to perform there.
Hmm.
So we have a Madison Square Garden that nobody even knows exists yet. You're the first to know, and it's they've been building it for about 3 years. But Madison Square Garden says New York. Well, now it's going to say New York, Las Vegas.
Oh wow. So they have the both the New York connection and the Vegas connection. You mentioned the Formula One, and I know that one of the things that you are into as a spectator, not necessarily into it as a participant, is the sports car racing. It's very big, as you know, here in North Carolina, because you mentioned that you have some friends and ties here in the area. I think Apex is one of the towns, and definitely the Raleigh Durham area and some other areas that are part of our
Right.
North Carolina city life and everything. But what was it about sports cars that you were driven driven to or driven into a appreciation of? Because I'm thinking that you might have been as a youngster watching Happy Days and doing some of the other things that got folks into that, or maybe you were already into sports cars and into fast kind of life and all of that space with the cars and all that kind of way. But what drew you into the sports car life as a spectator?
I my first car was a TR4.
Mhm.
Do you know what a TR4 is? It's a
I've heard
Triumph. It's
the Triumph. Okay.
a Triumph. It's a very small car, two seaters, made in England, and that was my first car, and I was really cool when I was 18, and that was
Mhm.
my first car. And I drove to work, drove home, and my girlfriend. But you could only seat another person. But sometimes I
Right.
fit 3 or 4 people in there. So I actually performed. Do you know what a gym conta is? A gym
Well,
conta is how you perform stunts in your car.
okay.
You're as a driver. So entered this gym conta. It's kind of like a race, but it's done in a um, it's done in a track, but it's a flat. It's a
Mhm.
flat surface, and it's done like in a parking lot.
Okay.
And they put out all kinds of cones and stuff like that, and you have to perform these stunts with your car, driving around and not hitting the cones.
Oh
And
wow.
I was 18, and that's how I learned. And then I met a man who I ended up married, had a 1964 Mustang.
Hmm.
One actually Mustang was 64 and a half. So when you have like the fastest car in the street, and then I have a sports car, you just think you're really cool. And I was
Mhm.
18, and I don't know any different. And so that began my love of cars. And I would go to Road Atlanta. I would go to Pocono. These are racetracks.
Right.
Watkins Glen. I
Mhm.
started going to all the races in Watkins Glen in New York for maybe 12 years from 18 to 28. And you met all kinds of people and you partied and you have all kinds of things. But I also went to VIR, which is I Virginia International Raceway. I've been to Daytona uh, with different people because I just like fast cars.
Sounds like you like those fast cars. There's nothing wrong with that at all and everything. Is there, other than the ones that you mentioned, are there any ones that you really admire even to this day and everything?
You mean the racetrack or the car?
The car.
Okay. Well, I would love to have a Bugatti.
Okay.
Anybody who wants to give me one, I'll take one. Um, I love Maserati.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I love Porsche. My husband has two. Uh, I love the Mustang. Uh, my husband has a Roush Mustang. I drive a Mini Cooper.
Mm,
The reason I drive a Mini Cooper is because it's stick. It's stick shift, and you can't find cars that are stick shift anymore.
yeah.
But the Mini Cooper still makes a stick shift car, and
Mm.
every car I've ever owned has been stick shift. So I'm old fashioned,
Well,
but
speaking of,
it doesn't really go fast.
yeah, no, Mini Coopers don't go fast. But speaking
N-
of old fashioned, I know that you mentioned it earlier that you are a lover of the spirits, whether that's the traditional spirits or wine or beer. So I was wondering if there are any that you are bigger fans of than others. I know some dear friends of mine have actually started, and it's been now out for a while, a wine company called Shoe Crazy, and that is based in Virginia. It is a woman and her daughter and son that are involved in that because she had a love of both shoes and wine. So she produced a wine company called Shoe Crazy, and
That's
a
cool.
another one has the title Southern Wicked, but that's more of a liquor kind of thing, a hard liquor. But she's definitely got that, and that is Southern Wicked Lemonade, I believe, is the full name. But tequila is definitely involved in that space, and there are others that are doing stuff like I think there's a one called Old Hillside that's a bourbon, and there are a couple of other craft beers that are very popular here because I know craft beers and just craft liquor became very big over the last several years and definitely over the last decade and everything. But what is your go-to drinks, and are there any favorites of yours?
Well, I make my own wine at a place called Grape Expectations, and I crush my grapes. I put them in barrels, and it takes about a year and a half,
Mhm.
and end up and I bottle my own wine. I don't sell it because I don't have a UPC code and I don't have a license to sell, but I give my wine away. I'll send you one.
But
And my wine is spectacular. But a lot of people think a sommelier is wine. It's bourbon, scotch, tequila, rum, champagnes of the world, beers of the world, cigars of the world. And it's not just wine. I like wine. I personally like Carmenere.
mhm.
Carmenere is the blackest grape in the world. It makes a very rich, hearty wine that's sometimes blended with Merlot. But I like the wines from Australia. I like the wines of Croatia. Uh, we don't grow those grapes here in America so much because they're harder to get the vines and stuff. Um, but to answer your questions, I grew up in a city, and the city had a brewery. It was called Schmitz.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of Schmitz beer?
I think I've heard that title, but I can't remember
Okay.
where.
It was a German. We lived in kind of a German community, and there was a brewery in in the city where Tommy Lasorda lived, and so I grew up on beer.
Mhm.
So I'm a beer lover. Now I do like Sam Adams. I don't like IPAs. They don't appeal to me. A
Mhm.
lot of people only drink IPAs, which means India Pale Ale.
Right.
Yeah, okay. I like Scotch. Neat, not with ice,
Right.
just plain. Um, but I like a margarita once in a while. You know, there are many different levels of tequila that you can drink neat, like an añejo and a platinum. There's new kinds of tequila coming out now. I cannot drink tequila neat. It's
Mhm.
not. It doesn't agree with me. But I'm a beer lover from way back.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Well, I went to school in a beer loving town, that being Milwaukee, because definitely was not an avid beer drinker in high school, but going to a beer town, you definitely were going to drink some beer as a alumni of Marquette and all in that space. But
Oh yeah.
I would sometimes intentionally be a little bit contrary. So I might order wine when going to the bar just to be a little bit different and everything. And I know that was something that I used to do on a regular basis. And as you were talking about that homemade wine, and I would love to get a copy of that at some point, or a bottle or two of that at some point. But I had a great uncle, and particularly the great, well, yeah, I don't think the great aunt was involved with it, but the great uncle actually made some homemade dandelion wine and other kinds of wine, like what you're talking about. I think there was a plum wine, and he actually called it Lion's Farm, and like he didn't have the license stuff, so he would just give it away and things along those lines. But I remember decades ago, or at least yeah, probably about a decade and a half or 2 decades ago, a friend of mine came and visited me. It was a social visit, so there was some possible chemistry there that did not materialize, but they were actually doing crocheting the entire time that they were coming to our family visit. But when my great uncle broke out the wine, they went from Dr. Jekyll to Mrs. Hyde. So that was definitely an interesting experience. Because,
What you're
like,
saying, you can't crochet and drink wine at the same time?
well, you could do both at the same time, but they were kind of ignoring the social aspect of being
Okay.
there. So I think they were a little being gun shy or just shy in general. So they were not being sociable with the family. But when they, even though they, and that might have been the wrong time to bring them to a family outing. So I will even take part of the blame as well. But all I know is that after the wine came out, they definitely became more sociable and all in that space. I remember when they left and we've totally lost touch, but when they left, they were asking, "Can you send my? Can you have Uncle that particular uncle? I think that was Uncle Charles. Send some of the wine to me in Texas because they were living in Texas at that time. I don't know if they still are in Houston, but they were in Houston and they definitely wanted a copy of that particular liquor, and I don't think that was going to happen because I think my family felt that they were being a little bit on the rude side and all in that kind of way. So definitely that was just one of those interesting wine asides and all in that kind of space. One of the things I was curious about, there's a myth that goes around, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. And definitely, I have always thought and have been told from some friends of mine that when you get older, you can still enjoy some of the things that you enjoy in your youth, like the liquors and also like the intimacy of sex and other things along that space. But I think that some people are of the opinion that once you get old, that is gone from your life. And I don't think that it's gone from your life because I know some folks in their 70s and 80s that are still very much active. And in some cases, there is less danger because you're not concerned about pregnancies and other things that might happen when you are younger and all in that space. So what do you say to those folks that are like, you can't be still active? You're 70 and you're about to be 80. So there's no way that can be a part of your lifestyle.
Well, my book title is called A Single Touch.
Mm-hmm.
And my book is about interludes with men, women throughout my life, and interludes of uh, different people that are not that are gay or lesbian, and all. So anyway, but the book is called A Single Touch by Mary Jane Splain, and it's about sex.
Mm-hmm.
And sex has been a big part of my whole life. And at 77, yes, I still have sex. And yes, I still enjoy it. Yes, it doesn't have to always be oral. It doesn't have to be laying in a bed. It could be on a bicycle. It could be in a pool.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it can be wherever your imagination brings you. I think sex is mental, it's not always physical. And if you have a connection with someone and you want them to touch you, you want to touch them, it's different ways to have sex. It's not always lay down in the bed and, we'll get it on. There's
No,
many ways to make love,
no.
many ways to have passion, many ways to have intimacy. And it's sometimes it's holding hands and that leads to something else.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's a kiss that lingers and that leads to something else. Uh, at 77, yes, I still have sex.
No. And along those same lines, I sometimes wonder whether you're 77 or whether you're 57 or even 37, or I would even argue 17, if there aren't some folks that leave the fun out of relationships and they do it a little bit too much of the traditional ways and they don't have the fun, because I think that in all things, whether it is relationships or whether it is just going out on a date or whatever is going on in that space, that you have to have a sense of fun. And I don't think that we oftentimes do that. I think that there are a lot of folks that are very much doing the tried and true and aren't leaving a sense of joy and a sense of exploration and a sense of that fun element within what is going on. So, what is your thoughts? And is that something that the book talks about? Because I do feel that sometimes we have a number of folks that are going through the motions and not really trying to add that fun element to their life, whether that is sexual fun or other fun that can be out there as well.
Well, a lot of people don't ever have anybody to teach them how to enjoy sex. Somebody, at the age of 18 or 19, they have sex with a partner and they're with that partner for 35 years. And they have it the same way for 35 years. If you can find somebody that's willing to teach you, the way I taught how to give oral sex is from a gay man. A gay man taught me how to do oral sex on a man, because men give oral sex to other men and they know how they enjoy it. And that's how I learned to do oral sex. And he was one of my chefs,
Okay.
because I've always been in the food and beverage industry. So if you find somebody that's willing to teach you, open up your eyes and listen. Don't be afraid to let people touch you. But most people won't even talk about sex. They're afraid to talk about it because they think they'll uh, infiltrate something in your past that maybe will hurt you. But sex is beautiful. Sex is fun. Sex is part of life. And some people don't have sex their whole life, or maybe have one partner their whole life. If they have the same partner their whole life, they don't experiment because that's how they want it. I knew several men in my life who were always on top. The woman never got on top. And they spent their whole marriage like that, 25, 35 years. And then they met me. Well, they got a lot of surprises. So,
I'm sure they
uh,
did and everything. And along those same lines, how do you feel? Because I think a lot of times people just on the not just the sexual side, but on the relationship side, that they get stuck in their way or my way kind of attitudes, and they put restrictions on what the relationship could be like or where the relationship should be going. And sometimes those are societal restrictions, because I do know that there are a number of folks that have guilt trips, because I know that I have either chosen to or stumbled across folks that I have dated that have been in the church lane. And after the relationship got to a certain physical part, then they started having the guilt trip. So I was just wondering if you have encountered that and how did you deal with that? Because I do know that sometimes that can be this kind of feeling that, we shouldn't have been doing that, or because we shouldn't have been doing that, you should have been doing that, or we need to go down the marriage path, even though the marriage path isn't for everybody. So have you had folks that have tried to lay that guilt trip on you, even in your age now and definitely when you were younger? And how did you deal with that guilt trip?
well, uh, I'm going to put it one or two ways. Do you have relationships where there are men who are bullies
Mm-hmm.
and they want to bully the woman into sex, and they want always him to have an orgasm first, and
Mm-hmm.
then maybe she'll have one later, but it's more about people who are selfish. Uh, that's one scenario. But there are also women who don't want to be touched, uh, don't want you to put their mouth on their vagina.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they only, and they don't want you to touch their breast because it's sacred.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's how you're brought up, and but if you learn to read, if you learn to experiment with your body by yourself, or with a friend or with your sister or whoever, but if you learn to experiment what your feelings are when you're by yourself, then maybe you could be powerful in a relationship. But
No,
if you don't ever experiment on exposing your emotions sexually, then you left all that behind, and you've never had the gratification of having someone satisfy you.
But along those same lines, and this is just my thoughts, and I was wondering your thoughts about this. You have some people that are intimidated by the chemistry, because I do know that there have been times that folks have felt that the relationships was going too strong or whatever. You might have been going out in a relationship, and then you get into a moment of passion. Maybe there is just a simple kiss or something, and there is that spark. And sometimes people are intimidated by that spark. I know that that has happened in some cases that I have been part of, and I've even backed off of some of those cases because they literally told me that they were intimidated by the relationship and the chemistry that was going on, and they were afraid that it might take them down a path that maybe they weren't prepared for, they felt we weren't prepared for, and all in that space, or maybe they were afraid to explore. So I'm just wondering, have you encountered that where people have been a little bit afraid of the sparks that can fly? Because definitely people can get intimate sparks when they are getting those simple things like a simple kiss or something along those lines.
I this takes me back to different women that have talked to me over their life. Some women are generally physically hurt during sex.
Mm-hmm.
Sex hurts them, and they've never learned how to relax and enjoy it. And some men are rough, and some men, want to be powerful. Some men and or women, they want to be powerful. They want to take over the sexual act. But I personally have never encountered that scenario. Uh,
Gotcha.
but there's a lot of women, maybe they've been raped,
Mm-hmm.
and they they're afraid of anybody to touch them for the rest of their life because it's been such a horrific experience. Now, men can be raped too,
Yep,
not
there's
just
definitely,
women.
yeah, man can be raped, and there can be the abuse can happen on the man side too. It can be either physical abuse
Yes.
or emotional abuse, because abuse can happen on a number of levels. And to your point, there could have been even in a hurtful relationships, because we all bring the that I know they say leave the baggage at the door, but it's easier said than done. We all bring a sense of the baggage of our past relationships, and we all have the different rules that we alike. I know some people that are definitely very much in the cleanliness space, and so they're not necessarily going to be thrilled if they are running into an Oscar, if they are more of a Felix and all along those lines. And that's just the truth of the matter, because definitely people have their own guidelines for what they want in the relationship, whether that is the certain kind of car, certain kind of things that they want you to bring to the relationship. And you can either adjust if you're not bringing those, or you can decided that's not the one for that situation or for that lifetime, because definitely we can make adjustments if they are things that can be corrected and all along those lines. Because I think that one of the things that people oftentimes wonder about, even in relationships, is, what are you bringing to the relationships? Because I know some people want somebody that will, do the majority of the driving, and I'm actually a non-driver, or they want somebody that can do the majority of the cooking, and I actually cook out, well, or eat out way too much. And it sounds like you have, I don't know whether you are one of those that is a regular cook or haven't cooked a meal in a number of years or all in that space, but you are in the food industry, so you probably cook regularly and are probably good at cooking. But what do you say to those folks that are looking for specifics in what they want?
I think every relationship comes down to one thing, it's trust.
Right.
And a lot of the relationships that are starting online, and people put their profile online and things like that, and they don't tell the truth
Mm-hmm.
and the truth about themselves. And you find out the truth 30 days or 60 days or 3 months into the relationship, that you maybe start to build trust right away, but then the trust is torn away and then you have to rebuild it. Uh, so uh, I think every relationship starts with a simple touch or a simple, your eyes catching somebody, or you like the way they're dressed, or something sparks. Like you said, the word spark. Something sparks your interest in that person. The way they walk, the way they talk, the way they kind of move their body, or the way they carry themselves, or the way they're kind. Um, but I'm not a good cook.
Hmm.
Okay, first of all, I haven't cooked a meal in 25 years, but I'm still married to my husband. He's a triathlete and he runs, bikes, and swims, and he has certain foods at certain times of the day. So I don't cook. I because I work in hotels. I eat at work.
So when it comes to his meals, does he eat out quite a bit, or do
No,
you?
no, no. He eats at he'll have he'll have breakfast at 5:30 in the morning because he runs 10 miles at 4 to 6. He'll run 4 to 6, and from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. He'll run, no matter what the temperature is here. Okay, he'll run 6, 8, 10 miles. Then he'll eat breakfast. I'm still in bed or I'm already at work. So
Gotcha.
our lifestyle. So I don't prepare a meal. I don't shop for him. I don't clean his toilets. I don't wash his clothes, and I don't cook for him. So what do I do for him?
But I'm sure there's all kinds of things you can do to make him happy and all in that kind of space. But I guess the question I've got to ask is he the good cook? Because like I said, I know that I
Yes, he is. But he eats a lot of protein.
well,
You know,
yeah, I can see
he'll cook
that.
a small steak or a pork chop. He doesn't eat a lot of carbohydrates, fruit,
Yeah.
vegetables. So a lot of things is prepared by chopping it up. But he eats a lot of protein.
Yeah. So what do you say to those folks? As you mentioned social media, and there's a lot of people in social media that are into the superficial, and when they get to the superficial, they will dismiss people for simple reasons. And I know that when I was younger, there was a woman that I dated. I think she was from DC, and I was somewhat turned off by the mole that she had on her face, and I probably over accentuated paying attention to that. And I'm not saying that I don't have my fault even then, and I even have definitely fault now and everything, since I'm not nearly doing enough exercise and all in that space. And then you got some folks that will see somebody that is a woman that is short haired, and they automatically associate her with somebody that just recently passed, like a Sinead O'Connor, and all along those lines. And they'll dismiss folks for that reason. And there are a number of other reasons that people will dismiss folks, whether it is color or whether it is clothing styles or whether it is a number of other things that can be out there. So, what do you say for those people that get too caught up in the superficial?
Well, for 9 years, I worked with people with disabilities
Hmm.
in Los Angeles. And my job was to find people with disabilities jobs
Hmm.
with corporations. So if a person's blind and deaf, like Helen Keller, my job was to find a job for her. I don't see a person that has a disability and with one arm. I used to work with a guy, his name is Richard DeVilder. He had no arms and no legs. Uh, his mother in the late 60s took flutamide, and so he was born a stump. He had a PhD. He typed with a stick in his mouth, and he finished a PhD through Cal State Long Beach. So I would sit and have lunch with him. I would learn from him, but I didn't see a person with no arms and no legs. I work with people who are blind and deaf. And what can a person blind and deaf do? Anything they want, because I don't see the disability. People who are African American or Chinese or something, or half white. I have members of my family that are half African American and half Caucasian. And people dismiss them at certain times of their life because they aren't one or the other.
Yeah.
I don't ever see a disability, lucky for me, because everybody has something wrong with them. Now,
Mhm.
it could be you're missing your back teeth, or your tongue is crooked, or you have a heart disease, or you only have one leg, or you don't have any toes, uh, and your face is deformed, or you can't walk without crutches. I don't see the disability. I only see the ability. And that's fortunate for me. It's not something I learned, it's something that was instilled in me as a child. You just accept everyone that is put in front of you, because everybody has something to teach you. You and I have 7 billion people in this world. Everybody has something to teach you. You need to listen.
No, I agree with as you were saying that. The reason I had that smile on my face and I was somewhat laughing is I was in a clubhouse room, and I think it was about a day or two ago and everything. And they were it was one of those relationship rooms, and they were basically the one of the women was complaining because somebody had a deformity, and I guess the person didn't inform her of the deformity, so she pretty much ran away from the relationship. And the way she was describing it, it sounded like he had a webbed hand, so the hand was kind of attached and everything.
Uh,
So it was not a natural thing. I think another time it was like a missing digit that was out there, and I don't think that that person had told them either. So they might have missed a great opportunity because they were so uh, thrown off by
ups,
what they were expecting that they might not have got to know the person, because it could have been the greatest person in the world that they were dismissing and all in that space, and they were still being dismissive to them somewhat in the room that I was in. But I'm thinking to myself now, as you were talking, they could have missed a serious gem, but they will never know because they never got to know the person.
right. Whether a person is skinny or fat or tall or short, everybody has something to teach you. Don't be obsessive about what you think you see. Learn about the person first. Get
Yeah,
in their brain,
yeah,
because they're smarter than you in some way. Maybe not always, but everybody has an opportunity to grow. And everybody crossed your path for a reason.
yeah. Yeah, I can definitely see that. I mentioned earlier, and I do have some friends that are some that are young grandmothers, and some of them love being grandmothers. But what do you see as the best part about being a grandmother? I've had some friends that have become grandmothers as early as their 40s, some that have been more traditional grandmothers of 60s, 70s, and 80s. But I've definitely had some friends that, because of their own life path, and when they had their children, and when the children had children, were grandmothers at a earlier age, and sometimes it can also be a problem within the relationship space, because not every sometimes it's hard enough for them to find relationships when they are creating an instant family, meaning that the person that is dating them is going to have an instant family if they have a kid. But if the kid has a kid, then it's not just an instant family, it's also an instant grand family. And that actually happened to my cousin, and when he married his wife, and they've been very successfully married now for multiple decades and all in that kind of space. I don't know that his mom was all that thrilled. She has passed on, and I never had that full conversation, but I don't know if she was all that thrilled, because he wasn't just going into a relationship with a his own child, because he had a child of his own, but also he was going into a relationship that was both the child and the grandchildren. So he was definitely picking up a significant family structure, is the best way to describe it, and all in that kind of way. But what is your thoughts, one, about being a grandmother, and advice you give to those grandmothers that might be trying to go in the dating lane when they have more than a little bit of things that they've got to cope with?
Well, I grew up with a grandmother who lives 2 blocks from me.
Mhm.
And every day I could, I would go over to her house and she would make me lunch, because my school was across the street from her house.
Mm.
And everybody in the world should have a grandmother, and grandmothers are all different. And they only, some grandmothers work, but
Right.
I love being a grandmother. I have 8 grandchildren, 7 are girls,
Well,
1 boy, and he's 19. And the youngest is 14 now, and they go to the age of 29,
mhm.
my grandchildren. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And so they're at 4 are actually in college, and then the other ones are in high school and stuff like that. But I love being a grandmother because I can teach them what their parents forgot. I
Mhm.
can teach them fun things, and then they go home. I don't have to deal with them and their tantrums and stuff like that at night. I can deal with them on a day, on a week, events and things like that. To be a grandmother is a privilege.
Mhm.
To be a grandmother is special. You can cuddle them and let them go. You can
Right.
give them your insight, you can give them your thoughts, and you can give them your uh, and sometimes you give them money,
Mhm.
and the little things like that. And I think grandmothers are all different. I probably know 20 women who are raising their grandchildren
Yeah.
because the parents are at work, or the parents are on drugs, or the parents have abandoned them. And so the grandparents are raising them. So they've raised their own kids. Now they're raising their grandkids. And it's a struggle because they're older and they don't have the energy to deal with some of the stuff.
No.
I don't
That you
have that situation. None of my grandchildren live in this state. I
yeah.
have to go to see them.
But as you were saying that, I was actually thinking because I was reading an article. Actually, I was watching on TV earlier today. They were talking about, and he's out on bail and well, out of jail after serving the sentence for basically engineering the murder of his the mother of his child. But I was actually watching one of those crime series, and it was
Right.
about the Ray Caruth case and all of that. And I think that about 2 or 3 years ago, he just recently has some disabilities that came out because of the shooting and all in that space. But he just recently graduated from high school. I think it was either 2 years ago or 2 to 3 years ago that he graduated from high school and all in that space. And now he is definitely still under the care of his mother and getting into, I think, a hat business and a couple of other things. But that, to your point, that is what she wound up doing because of course, Ray, his father, I don't know, ever claimed. Well, now he's sent out some correspondence to him, so I guess he has claimed him to at some point in the whole conversation and everything. But he definitely, the grandmother who was the mother's mother, wound up raising him after that
Mm.
particular mother was shot and all in that space, and raised him here in the Carolinas and all along those lines. But seems like she's been very forgiving of that particular incident from what I read online and what I also heard a little bit of on that particular TV series. So you are right. People have their different reasons for taking care of them, but there are a lot of grandmothers
Right.
that are
You
having to
know,
take care of the kids.
I totally agree. That is a part of society. The grandparents is part of society that can teach you, they can love you, they can mentor you. I think everybody should have a grandmother. I was blessed with a grandmother who lived near me, loved me, nurtured me, guided me. If my mother had 13 kids, how did she have time? So I went to my grandmother for the things that I needed. Not everybody has grandparents close, but if you do, treasure it.
No, I definitely treasured mine when they were living there. Both passed many years ago. As a matter of fact, I think grandma, one of them might have been 40 years ago today or something along those lines. But definitely, it's been a minute since they have left and all along that space. But even in my creative journeys, because Grandma Molly was actually a librarian, created the first Black library in Raleigh, North Carolina,
Wow.
and did some other unusual things like even going to believe it was Columbia in like the 40s, which during the height of segregation. So that was definitely a victory for a lot of folks, but definitely a victory of determination because it wasn't that common to have that happen during that particular time frame and everything. But she was there, and then Grandma Mary worked at a cafeteria, at a school cafeteria. You talk about the school background and everything. It was also very active in the church community, and both of them helped shore and create some of the values that I still live with to this day. And speaking of values, just really quickly, when it comes to relationships, that this was a separate clubhouse room, but I'm going to bring it up and then hear your thoughts about it. One of the things that I heard people talking about was two C's, which is commitment and communications. And it does seem like a lot of people are apprehensive and afraid to go into committed relationships. And definitely, it seems like throughout society, communications has been a major problem, meaning that we give communications great lip service. Is that something we want to do? But I don't know that we do it effectively. So I just wondering, or do you think that those are two of the bigger drawbacks to relationships? And are there other things that you would add to them? And how would you, what things would you do to make sure that we are being effective communicators within relationships and making sure that we are being committed if that's what we want? Because not everybody wants to be in a committed relationship. You got some people that want to be in polygamous and open relationships as well, but even those can have their own form of commitment.
I'll start with commitment. I think commitment is something. It's a trait that you nurture in your own self.
Mhm.
You have to learn to have a commitment to your friends when you
Mhm.
walk to school. You have to have a commitment to your parents, your brothers, your sisters, your dog. Commitment to going to school on time, participating. Your commitment is something internal, uh, and it's biological as well. I truly think commitment is uh, it inspired by other people you meet. Uh, Commitment is something you learn from others, but it's also instilled with you as you're raised. I think you see a parent committed to a child, a mother committed to her husband, uh, a, a, a person committed to their church. That's different kinds of commitment. And or commitment to society when uh, I think a policeman, a fireman are all committed to society because that's what they want to do for a living. They want to serve people. Uh,
Yeah.
and if we go to communication, I think our country has lost it. I think
Mhm.
people are too much on time, too much time on the social media, too much time on the computer, too much time on television, too much time not face to face like you and I today, uh, too much time not listening, too much time not sharing. I think communication is somewhat lost. I think it needs to be restored. It's in some more families than others, but as I see the children in the foster care society, which I've dealt with for many years, people have a tendency to toss their children away. People have a tendency to toss commitment away, and I'll go get find somebody else. Um, some people toss children away like a glove because they don't want to deal with them anymore. I think I think conversation needs to be enhanced. I think conversation needs to be encouraged. I think you need to put down your cell phone in your car, at the dinner table, at work, and concentrate on the person in front of you.
Yeah, you definitely got to do that, and I think not enough of the people that are doing that on a regular basis. Coming back to some of the things that you had thought about, even as a child, were you the one? Because you definitely are very much engaging in conversation and all in that space. I heard what you said earlier about me being dynamic, and finding you to have some great dynamic conversation as well. But that being said, you are also an author. You mentioned that book that you've written and everything. So, did you always know that you wanted to be an author? And if so, how did you know that? And is this something that was always in your dream destinations, that you were always going to hope to be an author of some sort or another?
Well, I always excelled in English class and I love to speak. I love to listen. I love to write. I used to have my own newspaper column in Detroit. It was
Okay.
called this, and then I had my own TV show in Detroit with J.P. McCarthy. So I always found a way to communicate because my parents communicated with me. My first book is called Nan's Alphabet. Uh, it is a tribute to my mother,
Mm.
who's deceased now about 11 years. It's called Nan's Alphabet by Mary Jane Splain. It's a tribute to my mother and all the things she nurtured in us as children. Her grandchildren are in the book, her great grandchildren are in the book. The second is a children's book. It's called Nan's Alphabet for Children by Mary Jane Splain. And it's a children's book of where her children went, where her grandchildren went, and how she encouraged her children to travel. This is my mother. And the third book, it's about sex.
Gotcha. Speaking of all of those books and everything, what are some of the things? It sounds to me like there are a number of things that you've spoken about, whether it is food, whether it is the spirits, or whether it is relationships, both the intimate part of it as well as just a relationship in general, and even the relationship with life. And I would argue probably a relationship with Mother Nature and getting out in Mother Nature. are there other things other than those that make you happy and the person that you are? Because you definitely are a happy person. I was wondering, what is it about you that makes you happy, and what are you thinking are some of the keys to happiness in life?
I think the key to happiness in life is to get out of bed.
Hmm.
Some people are not able to get out of bed by themselves. Okay. If you get up, you open your eyes and you smile, just be happy to be where you are in that moment, in that place, with that alone or with that other person. I want to be happy wherever I am, whatever I'm doing. And I want to be a proud American. I want to be happy to be alive,
Hmm.
happy to be able to drive where I want to drive, eat what I want to eat, work where I want to work. We live in a great country and not everybody knows that. I'm happy to be 77. I'm happy to be healthy, and people literally give me jobs because I want to be happy with their customer.
Yeah.
I want to be happy around other people, and I want to be happy that you asked me on your show.
Well, I appreciate that and everything. You've been a great person on this show and everything. Speaking of that, do you sometimes think that we get too caught up in other people's mess, and I just leave it in that kind of way? Because I sometimes wonder if we're not too concerned about what's going on in other people's bedrooms or what's going on in their lives, and not spending enough time trying to deal with our own situations and everything. Because, like I said, I know a number of people will be upset. Maybe they come from the religious world and they're feeling that folks that are gay are breaking all kinds of rules from society, and therefore they shouldn't be doing whatever they're doing, but technically they don't even know what they're doing. And some of the things that even us heterosexuals do are technically against the rules of the Bible if you want to go by its strict definitions and all along those lines. But I was just wondering, are you thinking that we sometimes get too caught up in trying to police others, and whether it is in other societies or even in the United States as well?
I I think personally, this is
Mhm.
about me. I just want to mind my own business. I
Right.
go to work, I do my job, and I go home. I don't go drinking with my friends. I don't want to know where they're going on vacation. I don't know what they had for dinner. Sometimes you see people on Facebook, you know what they had for lunch and dinner, and you know where they want to go for breakfast, and you want to know where they're going on vacation. I don't care. I I just want to be happy with me. I'm happy to know them. I'm happy to be with them, but I don't want to get involved in their life because it makes my life more complicated. Uh, you know,
Yeah, the reason I was laughing again is because that was one of the accusations that my younger brother and even to some degree my parents made. And I am not saying that they're even not times, if you heard a couple of the narratives, and mostly they're my narratives, but there are things that some folks have said are a little bit too public and all along those lines. So I know that there was a time, particularly on social media, that they would get on me because they'd be like, we didn't really need to know what you were having for breakfast, and we really didn't need to know what was going on in the relationship and everything. Because sometimes we can be too open. That literally, I remember there was a time that I was in a relationship and also doing a blues show. And I'm gonna just be candid here. You could almost tell the nature of where the relationship was based on the selections of the songs that I was playing on that particular day. If they were a time that we were being frisky and it was going friskily well, then the songs might be a little bit more frisky oriented and everything. But if there was some times when things were a little bit tense, then there might be those tense type blues songs. Now, I did learn to masquerade it to some degree and not always play what was going on in the real life with what was happening that I was playing. But yeah, there was at least a time frame that the songs that I was projecting out there were probably very similar to what was going on in my life at that particular time. Now I've gotten better at that, and even now when I've not done DJing now for about a year, but when I've done it in the past, you wouldn't be able to tell whether I was in a relationship or happy with the person or not, because I have learned to mix up the styles and the narration, so you can't quite be as obvious. But yeah, there was a time frame that I was probably being overly obvious and all in that space. And I'm sure there, as we get older, we also get wiser.
Well, I think everybody needs to mind their own business, and everything's on social media, so it's going to be out there whether you like it or not. Some people want everybody to know what they bought at Macy's,
Right.
and everybody wants to know what pair of shoes they're wearing tonight, and other people want to know. Uh, what are you doing on your vacation? And are you going to Mexico? And all these people are going to Spain and France and these other countries. Just mind your own business. And if I want to tell you, I will. If I want to put it on social media, some people put everything on social media. One, because they're proud of it, and two, nobody else is paying attention to them. They want someone to pay attention to them.
No, I definitely agree with that. But I know even in your own stuff that I got from podcast guests, they did say that you have had the pleasure of, and you've alluded to some of them, visiting some fascinating people. So I was just wondering who are some of the most interesting people that you have met, and what are some of the lessons that you have learned from some of these people that you have met as well? Because you've traveled the world, you've met a number of folks, probably everybody from the pauper to the prince, and I'm using that expression because it's from the poor to the richest and all in that kind of way. But who are some of the fascinating people you have met, and what are some of the lessons you have learned from them?
One of the most fascinating people I ever met was Bill Clinton. And I was working at Caesar's Palace, and it was during Katrina, and Caesars and Harris and all those corporations gave him and George Bush $5 million. And so somebody had to hand him a check. For some reason, they nominated me. So I'm standing next to Bill Clinton at this meeting, and he said, hello. And he was kind, and he was genuine, and he really wanted to know who I was. So people, some people are fake. Some people are not kind. I have another very interesting lady is Sheryl Crow. She's a singer, and I've been to in elevators with her and moved around with her, in large venues and stuff like that. She's just wonderful. The nicest person I ever met was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
I can believe that.
He has come to dinner. I used to work at Spago with Wolfgang Puck, and he would come in with his wife. He was genuine to the servers. He was genuine to the staff. He was always polite, although he's 7'6" or however tall he is. He's a genuine, kind, gentleman. And I always say that, and I've never said that to him, but I've worked with Wolfgang Puck, and I've worked with Bobby Flay. I've worked with famous chefs. I've met Barack Obama. I've met Drake. I met Celine Dion. I met The Weeknd. I met Adele. Bette Midler is one of the nicest, kindest performers I've ever met. She'll come down. She'll be with her daughter. She'll introduce. She'll stay in the hotel. She's genuine, and she's kind. Not all performers are kind with their time. They're too busy, or they don't want to be bothered with you. I just accept them for who they are, because other people are pulling. I've met Elton John, kindest, gentlest, warm, giving man. Rod Stewart, another kind, wonderful, genuine person. I guess I can go on and on, because
you definitely mentioned some great names there, and everything. I'm getting ready to ask you about one, and then I'm going to make a comment about one that you just mentioned. But I've never had the pleasure of meeting Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but I get around by mass transit for whatever reasons, and all in that space. But one of the guys that I see regularly, and I want to say that he's in his I'm early 60s. He's probably in his early 70s and all in that space. But he literally, because of the Muslim connection, because he is a practicing member of that faith and everything, this particular gentleman, I was trying to think of his name. I want to say Abdul, but I could be totally wrong about his name. And the next time I see him, I'll get it and all in those lines. But he literally took care of Kareem's Arabians because he had a chance to take care of some of his horses, because people don't realize that he actually had some horses. And I want to say that he was the person that was keeping them on his land, because this particular gentleman has some access to some land and all along those lines. So I know that's been
Uh-huh.
part of the conversation, is him knowing and having a personal relationship with Kareem. And he described him just the way you did, as being a very warm and gentle person, and one that cared not just about this particular gentleman. Sounds like he cared about you, but also cared about those horses that were part of his stable. And I think there might even be one or two of them that he still
Uh-huh.
had in his stock, because they sold and have different other things that go on, including life and death. But I don't think that there are that many left. But I do know that this particular gentleman that I see on a fairly regular basis has great words about Kareem, just like you did as well. And like I said, I've never had the pleasure of meeting the great basketball player that is definitely, from what I've read, has also been a true activist as well, because I know he's definitely been involved in the activism space, both trying to make sure that athletes understand what they're getting into in the finance lanes, and also understanding some of these causes that are out there, whether that's Black Lives Matter or whether that's women's rights or a number of other things that I think he has spoken out on in life and all in that space, including some of the things that were going on in the police lanes and all in that kind of way. So definitely sounds like he's a truly fascinating person. So I'm looking forward to
Yeah, I
hopefully
probably have
meeting.
met him 12 times
Oh wow.
over my years. And as a server, I'm serving his table. I didn't, meet him like in a public transport. He had came into Spago or came into the restaurant where I was working, and I happened to be a server, and we're chatting over a period of 2 hours with
Right.
him and his guests, and and just being kind. And I just also have to mention my mother, who instilled in me, may you always see a smile
Oh
wherever you go. Every time you look in the mirror, her philosophy is look in the mirror and be happy with yourself. Just
yeah.
and that's what she taught me. Just
No,
be
that's a
happy.
great. Yeah, definitely got to be happy. I was just wondering, because I did mention that she had passed away not that long ago. If you ever had the pleasure, and I know she had some American tours, but I don't know how often she came here. If you ever had the pleasure of meeting Sinead O'Connor or anything in that space, because I do know that she was an Irish activist and a great singer there for a minute, and I think she just passed away like either yesterday or the day before. But it's been fairly
No, no, I've never. I actually have met Janis Joplin.
okay.
Way Mick Jagger, uh, um, people like that. But I never, and a lot of them appeared in, especially Mick Jagger appeared when I was young. You
Yeah.
know, I've met Sonny and Cher. Cher is, I don't really know Sonny, but I've met Cher probably on maybe 14 different occasions. Kind and gentle and generous with her time, and nice to staff. It goes on and on. But I meet people at work who are working next to me who are just kind. They're
Yeah.
they're kind and helpful. I have great bosses, um, and I just have great friends who are in the business and are kind to people and have taught me. I don't speak any other language, although I've been to 134 countries. I only speak English, and I find somebody who speaks English. And,
Right.
and maybe I should be more prolific in other languages, but I'm not. And maybe I should learn that. But, everybody has someone special in their life. Lucky for me, I've had many.
Yeah, sounds like it. Sounds like you had some great experiences. What do you do when you run across those folks that aren't that nice, or definitely along those lines? Because I know that I've had some business encounters with folks that are sometimes being abusive or not necessarily being in the nicest lane. So definitely, I know that the most celebrities, as you just said, because I used to go regularly to the National Black Theater Festival in Winston-Salem and was friends with Petrie Bird, and still consider myself a friend, and that was the bailiff on Judge Judy, and definitely some other people that I have met that have been in those lanes. Definitely would run regularly across Ruby and Ossie Davis and Mickey Grant. They were always amazing people, and I know folks didn't know them quite well or knew them quite well, and all along those lines. But there are some that can be a little bit more on the cantankerous side. I'll just put it that way. And I just wonder, as one that has to deal with all kinds of personalities, whether in business or in serving the folks, how do you deal with those that are not as nice as those that we have just described? Because it's easy to highlight the ones that are good, but what is your tool for dealing with those that are not as nice and not as respectful?
I I not too long ago I waited on one of Kim Kardashian's ex-husbands. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to say what his name is and or who he is, and he was not just unkind to me, he was unkind to the whole staff. He he was kind of tossing food around the table and being ignorant, and he I said, "Excuse me, sir, this is not a barn. You cannot throw food here." He said, "Do you know who I am?" I said, "I don't care who you are. You don't act like you're a pig." And he said, "Get your boss over here." And he said, and my boss came over and he said, "Look, somebody has to clean up their food you're throwing across the table and stuff like that." He was just unkind. And he was unkind to me. And I just, you go to a supervisor and uh, sometimes you come across a grocery clerk who is unkind and you ask questions and they don't want to answer you. Sometimes you come across somebody at work that's having a bad day or going through a divorce or whatever, or their children are sick or something, and they're mean. Some people are just plain mean. I just stay away from them. I walk away. No matter what it costs me, I walk away from those people. I don't want them in my life. I don't want them near me. And if they're unkind to others. But I don't want them unkind to me. But there's a lot of people who have other people are mean to them and they think they can be mean to you.
Yep.
And I won't allow it. Not at my age. Maybe when I was younger, I would tolerate it, but I'm not going to tolerate it at this age.
No, and you shouldn't tolerate it at all, and all in that space. And as a matter of fact, I have a sneaky suspicion because it was who I think it is, and they were involved with the Lakers. They used to have a show that lasted for literally about 2 or 3 episodes here on the network, and part of the relationship that they had with their management is part of the reason that that show doesn't exist. And I'll just leave it
Yeah.
at that. And I'm guessing that that is who that person is, because as you were describing, I'm like, yeah, that sounds like him, because I know that he's had some other issues, and it was actually involved in some tit for tat kind of suits that were going on as well. But yes, I have a funny feeling that that person is who that is, and we can talk about it offline after we wrap up in a few minutes. But I have a funny feeling that's one of the reasons that the show didn't last long, because they weren't handling things professionally on a lot of different levels. And I'll just leave it at that, because you need to handle
You know,
things.
it only takes a minute to be nice. That's
Exactly.
all. That's it.
Exactly.
Just be nice. And so, some people, if they have money and they have more money than you have, they think they're more important than you are. But this is my philosophy of life. Everybody comes out of their mother's vagina nude. Everybody. And
Yeah.
everybody's born the same way. Other people have opportunities that are given to them or they make, but everybody's born the same way. Just treat everybody equally. And I don't care how much money you have. I don't care where you live or where you're from, or whether you're a man or woman, or whether you're gay or a lesbian or anything transvestite. I don't care what you are. Just be nice.
No, I hear you, and I hear you loud and clear. And actually, the this is a special edition of the online dinner party, and on our regular edition on Wednesday, that is actually what one of the guests said, because they literally went from being a welfare mom, and was the traditional model of a welfare mom, not the stereotype model. Because if you study statistics, the white woman is actually the face of the welfare mom, meaning that there are more white women in welfare than the stereotypical black woman that
Oh,
is
I agree.
shown on media. So this was a white woman that was on welfare, and she is now a millionaire in her business. I can't remember whether it was law or medicine or what she got into after she got out of the situations that led her down the wrong path in terms of finances. But she said something very similar, which is, be respectful and be your authentic self, but also be respectful to all people involved, whether they are on your same level or on a different level. And I've always believed that you should treat people with dignity, whether they are your secretary and receptionist, or whether they are the CEO or Elon Musk or whoever else you want to go into. I know years ago I wrote a skit. It was called the Confessions of a Buppy, and Buppy is a term for Black urban professionals. It's kind of the Black version of
Oh, okay. I
yuppies and
never
all.
heard that expression.
And I think there was a couple of, I know there was BAP and a couple of other movies that were out there that were about that part of society, but it was a short play skit that was produced. I did it on the Cultural Arts Center that I work at, but it was about how one of the scenes, the person is on the bus and they are running into some homeless people, and then they run into the janitor and they run into some other folks, and they are being very dismissive of them within this story. And at the end, they find out that some of the keepers of the secrets, the keepers of the knowledge, are actually those people that are in those kind of offices. So one of the things that was revealed at the end is that janitor, he might want to be nice to that janitor, because the janitor might know more about what's going on in the corporation than some of his
Right.
corporate buddies did, and all in that space. So we have to be careful as how we treat those that are considered lesser, because a lot of times they might know more about the entire business than even and all in that space, because a lot of times they have more access than you think that they have. And I'll just leave it at that and all along those lines. But it was just a fascinating thing that I did. I think that was about 20 years ago or all in that space. We're going to wind down very shortly, but I just had a couple of very other quick questions. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. But you've traveled so much around. What are some of your favorite places that you have visited, both in terms of cities in the United States and even places around the world? So what are some of the places that you have really enjoyed going to, and what is still on the bucket list? What is the place that you have not gone to that you hope to get to before you hit, say, 80 or before you hit 90? Or you might be like me, because I've joked on this show and other shows going for 200. There's nobody that's done it, unless you want to believe some of the figures in the Bible, and more than likely I won't either. But hey, you might as well set a impossible goal, because the worst that you can do is not make it.
I have rafted down the Amazon with me and a guide, just the two of us, down the Amazon for 7 days, and I want to raft down the Nile.
Oh, wow.
The Nile River.
Uh-huh.
Okay, in Africa. If going down the Amazon is very, very dangerous. That was about 6 years ago. And so my first thing on the bucket list is to raft down the Nile, just me in a canoe, just not on a big cruise boat, just me and a guide in a canoe. I'm willing to do that. I've been to Antarctica. I walked across Antarctica within 1 degree of the South Pole, and that was 7 years ago. And the boat had 100 people, and they were all Russian scientists.
Oh,
and
wow.
I got to see parts of Antarctica no one will ever see. And it was cold. It was beautiful. It was tragic because it's melting.
Gotcha.
And I have been, one of the most interesting places was Madagascar. It has one large city in the whole island. It's called Antananarivo, and it's lawless. There is no army there. It's people just run rampant, and it's probably really frightening, but it's a beautiful island with all these coral reefs, and a lot of botanists go there to Madagascar. It's not like the cartoon where there's giraffes and zebras and stuff like that. There's hardly any animals on Madagascar. I would have to say Bangkok, Thailand is the number one city. Not specific to a country. Bangkok, Thailand, the food, the people, the kindness, their lifestyle, their Buddha, the way they treasure family. It's probably my number one city. This year I went to Cape Town, South Africa, and visited Robben Island, where Nelson Mandela was in prison for 17 years. I thought I knew the story. He never went into prison until he was 46
Wow.
because the government wanted him out of dealing with people because he wanted to get rid of apartheid.
Yeah.
But going to Robben Island and seeing where these men were all in prison and how they dealt with being eliminated from society, nobody knew where they were, and they were treated, that was fascinating. And that was just 4 months ago. So
Wow.
they're probably my top.
Those sound like some amazing stories and some amazing places to go to and everything. As we wind down, and I'll ask you the same questions I ask everybody toward the end and all along those lines. But one of the things I was curious about is I know that part of what your profile is about is, and you kind of alluded to a couple of times, in addition to the work that you've done and all in that space, is the notion of being a community advocate. So I just wondered, how important do you think it is for folks to be advocates in their community for whatever their causes are? And all along those lines. So I definitely know that that is something that you are passionate about. But what is the importance of community activism to you, or being a community advocate?
There's always somebody in your community that needs help.
Mhm.
It could be somebody who's homeless and doesn't want to be homeless. There's a woman who is battered and trying to get away from her husband. There's children in foster care that don't want to be put there because their parents abandon them, or the courts take them away from the parents because of drugs. You have to give to people who are less fortunate than you. You're given so many things in life. Give back, because it'll come back around to you. Your advocacy is just your heart reaching out to people who have nothing. When I say nothing, have we ever not had nothing?
Mm.
If you can say to me, I've never had nothing, I won't believe you. I know people who have nothing, and
Right.
I have to go out and I have to give part of my day to them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and definitely, uh, I've definitely had some struggling times, but there was always family members that would be there to support if you are willing to go to them. And sometimes pride can get in the way, so you don't always go to them and everything. But there was always, if not a bed to lay on, there was always a place that you could go, whether that is a center or a shelter, and there was always usually some sense of food or some sense of communications or other things. So to me, when you say not have nothing, have I been in very poor situations? I've even been in those situations fairly recent and everything. That is still not nothing, because there are those that don't have literally nothing at all. They don't have a bed. They don't have a
Right.
house. They don't have food. They don't have a number of other things that
They
we
don't
have.
have friends.
Right. They don't have friends. They don't have the other things that are important to life. So that is something that I can say that I have definitely not been down that path, even though I've got some friends that have probably been closer to it than I am. But yeah, I've got friends and family that I can turn to, and I've definitely got some material things that I have here, maybe not nearly as many as some others that might be more materialistic or had better luck with their riches or whatever. But definitely, I can't say that I have not had nothing, because I have a family that I care greatly about. I don't have any kids of my own or even grandkids or anything outside of my own immediate family, but I do have my brother, my two, who was married twice, about to be possibly married a third time if they can ever get the date situated. They had some health concerns of their own, which is the only reason that it hasn't happened, and all in that space. And I personally think that she is the one that is the most like the person that he'll be connected to with for life and all in that space. But that's just my own personal thoughts around that and everything. But I do have my two nephews, and I'm fortunate to still have both parents still living, have at least two aunts that are still living as well. And well, my dad is still around. Trying to think of all of the yeah, all of the uncles have passed away, unfortunately. But I do have two living aunts, and definitely have a multitude of cousins and second cousins and others that are part of the family circle as well, including some that are not necessarily related. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes your relatives that you get from the other side wind up being just as close to you as you are if they were your blood relatives. Like I have some
Totally agree.
cousins that are not necessarily my cousins, because they're more like on my uncle's side of the family, but we still talk, and the way we communicate and vibe with each other, we feel like we are almost first cousins, even though technically they are on the uncle side of the family, if that makes any sense.
Of course it does. You get what you give, but
Right.
there's always somebody out there less fortunate than you. All you have to do is find them.
Yep. I definitely agree with you on that. Well, like I said, we'll definitely get ready to wrap it up. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I hope you'll come back. Sometimes it's one-on-one, as this has been, and as the one that I had with the wellness lady from California was, and sometimes it is a multitude of guests, as it was yesterday. But I'm hoping that you'll come back, whether it's a one-on-one or whether it's a one with a multitude of guests conversating and all in that space. But as you've probably known from looking at some of those interviews and everything, I always get my guests to say how they can be reached and contacted if they are interested in that, and how the books, if they have books, can be purchased and all in that kind of way. And if they're still doing podcasts or anything in the social media or media lanes that they want to share, this is the time to do that. And the other thing that I get all my guests to do is a message of positivity and hope, because we are on a global network. So this is kind of my own personal mission, and everything is to try to spread as much positivity and hope as possible. So I do that by having my guests share their messages of positivity and hope and spreading the word as much as we can. So I'll turn the floor over to you. And if you want to tell folks how they can reach you, how they can get the books, if there are podcasts that you're still involved with, how they can get those, and if there is a message of positivity and hope that you would like to share with our audience.
The message I want to share with your audience is be kind. Be kind to each other and be kind to yourself. You're the most important person in your life. Just be kind and be generous to yourself with time and giving the right nutrition to your body, and spiritually and nutritionally. And the podcast I'm on, I'm on a regular podcast, Price is Business, with Kevin Price. I'm on there monthly, and it's called Candid Comments by Kathy Healey. And I just want to say I'm proud you found me. I'm proud to be on you. I had fun.
Good.
I had fun on your show.
Thank you. I'm glad you had fun.
I laughed a lot at your comments. You and I have a lot in common. We have a lot of empathy for others.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very empathetic toward others. That is no doubt about that and everything. So I appreciate you being on. We'll go out unless you have some final words that you want to share with a message. And it's actually a short poem about the power of coaches and coaches as teachers. So I sometimes end with that particular one that a friend of mine turned me on to, that is a friend of his reciting this particular work and all along those lines. So I'll give you the floor if you've got any final words that you want to say. Otherwise, we'll get ready to play this spot. And at the 6 o'clock hour, we'll have Coco McMillan on, and she'll be talking about things in the sports world, because she used to work with Joe Levert when he was living, and definitely has done a number of other work in the gospel and R&B scene of her own. And she's even got a tie to a club in Morocco. So that's on my dream list, is to go to Morocco and visit that club, and maybe just visit that country, because that is definitely on the dream list, along with Belize, Colombia, and some of the other Latin American countries. So any final thoughts that you want to share, Kathy? Otherwise, we'll get ready to get this spot and get ready to get on out of here.
The only thing I want to say is thank you for the opportunity. I hope your audience knows that you're the most important person in your life. Go for it. Expand your horizons, travel, but learn how to love yourself, and then you can learn how to live others. And that includes animals, and includes children, includes police, firemen, your priest. Learn how to deal with and love everyone. And thank you so much.
No problem. So the great way to end everything, we'll end it with that, as well as this message about education. But I thoroughly enjoyed it and look forward to seeing you in the not too distant future.
Call me anytime.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
The difference between thinking and doing and living in the 21st century. They teach us about being a real quarterback-oriented games. We don't have to just use video games and live in the shadows of good things because of them. We grow up with agility far larger and bigger than we are tall. Parents are the champions and have to be our first life coaches and know-it-alls. Who knows how this came to be? Coaches will ask you if you know your right foot from your left, if you know yourself, if you act knowingly good or bad, if you can move and negotiate a field with style and form, if you can tackle or throw a pass, or if your last name is that of a clown, if you can let someone know on the team that you are in trouble before you cause yourself or someone else trouble. If you are ready to learn teamwork or aware that you started out today with your pants down or your sportsmanship was left on the kitchen table, if you know the social studies, the alphabets, science, music, characters, and the stats and the numbers of a great student player eligible to stay on the team, and if you know the poise of great athletic champions and their scientific attitudes that are historical or music to us now, if you have the swag of the game, the discipline, the performance, and artistic form down pat, and if you have the style of gymnastics that the sport has with life, if you have the work ethic and determination to make it all seem easy and not a game at all, if you have the knowledge of all the above, or you don't know things like this even make the difference, I think that when it comes to the importance of parents and their field and self-knowledge, wisdom, virtues, and courage, their teachings, love, respect, care that they illustrate on the field and in the grind of life with their actions and their ideas, experiences, muscle, and strategic magic and skills wrapped around us with their priceless love. For their verbs to be that make us winners in this hard and fast third century that without them, kids and adults, athletes could hardly see or do anything at all. Parents teach us the difference between playing video games and playing on the field. Parents teach us how to be champions. A huge hug should go to parents, coaches, and parent-like community people who have love on the field for you and who are champions for your life, both in and out the games.